My daughter wanted me dead for money, but I outsmarted her and took my life, and fortune, back. The air in Alara's opulent drawing room, usually thick with the scent of lilies and old money, was suddenly charged with a different kind of tension. At 78, Alara possessed a quiet dignity, her silver hair impeccably coiffed, her silk dress a testament to understated wealth. She sat on a gilded fauteuil, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor running through her fingertips as she clutched a delicate porcelain teacup. The tremor was not of age, but of a quiet, internal battle, a suppressed tremor of the spirit that had long yearned for recognition, for genuine connection. Across from her, on a plush velvet sofa, sat her only daughter, Briar, a woman of 52 who carried herself with an air of entitled elegance, her features a finely sculpted mask of practiced charm. Beside her sat Briar's husband, Sterling, 55, a man whose charm, Alara knew, was as thin and brittle as old ice, a mere veneer over a calculating core. "Oh, mother, it's going to be absolutely divine," Briar gushed, her voice a practiced melody of superficial delight, each word a perfectly enunciated note of self-congratulation. "A whole month, sailing the Mediterranean on a private yacht. Think of it, darling. The Greek Isles, the Amalfi Coast, Santorini sunsets, the ancient ruins of Ephesus, exclusive dinners in Positano. Pure bliss. And the children are so excited about the water sports." Sterling nodded enthusiastically, a glint in his eye that Alara recognized not as genuine excitement, but as the gleam of projected self-importance, envisioning himself at the helm of this grand adventure, impressing unseen audiences. Alara offered a small, polite smile. For years, she had harbored a quiet longing to see the sun-drenched shores of the Mediterranean. It was a dream she'd often mentioned in passing, a quiet yearning for beauty and exploration that was always met with vague nods, a hurried change of subject, or a dismissive wave of Briar's manicured hand. Now, as Briar meticulously detailed the lavish itinerary, every port of call, every Michelin-starred restaurant reservation, the private chef, the onboard masseuse, Alara felt a familiar ache of exclusion, a tightening in her chest that had become almost a constant companion. Yet, a sliver of hope, foolishly resilient, still flickered within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, this time would be different. This trip, after all, had been suggested by Alara herself, months ago, as a wistful thought for her own enjoyment. She had mentioned it once, a fleeting whisper into the wind, and Briar had somehow seized upon it, transforming it into her own grand plan. "That sounds truly wonderful, dear," Alara murmured, her voice soft, almost a whisper, the words barely audible over the clinking of her teacup. "I've always wanted to see the Mediterranean." Perhaps, she paused, allowing the unspoken invitation to hang in the air, a fragile request for inclusion, a hesitant step into the warmth she so desperately craved. "Perhaps I could join you for a part of the trip." The silence that followed was brief, yet it stretched, taut and uncomfortable, in the grand room. Briar's perfectly made-up face contorted, not in anger, but in a look of mild distaste, as if Alara had suggested something truly outlandish, something unsanitary, perhaps. Sterling, ever the diplomat of their shared self-interest, cleared his throat, a small, significant sound that always preceded a carefully constructed dismissal. Briar's gaze flickered to him, a silent communication passing between them, a shared understanding of how to handle this inconvenient request. "Oh, mother," Briar finally scoffed, a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand, as if swatting away an annoying fly. Her tone was light, airy, almost playful, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 judgments, a casual cruelty that Alara had grown accustomed to, but never hardened against. "You wouldn't enjoy it. It's far too active for someone your age, darling, and honestly, you'd just slow us down. Imagine, all those stairs on the island tours, the bustling ports, the late-night dinners, it's simply not your pace. We'll be constantly on the go, exploring, experiencing. You know how much you prefer your quiet routine." Sterling, ever the chorus to Briar's lead, chimed in with a saccharine smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, his words perfectly orchestrated to echo Briar's sentiment while appearing more benign. Yes, Elara, you prefer your quiet gardens, don't you? This is more for us. You know, for the children and their vibrant energy, their zest for adventure. This is a trip for making, shall we say, dynamic memories. Ones you simply wouldn't be able to keep up with, my dear. He punctuated his words with a patronizing pat on Elara's knee, a gesture that felt less like affection and more like an owner reassuring a docile pet, a pat designed to keep her in her place, compliant and silent. Elara's porcelain teacup, which she had held with such delicate precision, clinked against the saucer. The sound was surprisingly loud in the hushed room, a tiny chime marking the precise moment a long-held illusion shattered into a million irreparable pieces. It wasn't just the exclusion itself, or even the callous words, though they stung with a familiar venom. It was the sheer audacity, the blatant disregard for her feelings, the profound disrespect for her very presence, especially for a trip she, Elara, was entirely funding. She was paying for the private yacht, the Michelin-starred meals, the entire extravagant itinerary, down to the last drop of fuel and the smallest gratuity. The unspoken truth hung in the air, a noxious cloud that finally cleared her vision. They saw her not as a beloved matriarch, a fount of wisdom and warmth, but as an endless, inconvenient source of funds, a wellspring to be tapped and forgotten. A cold, clear certainty settled over Elara. The fragile hope had not merely flickered out, it had been extinguished by a blast of icy indifference so profound it left her breathless. She looked at her daughter, a woman she had poured her heart and fortune into, a woman she had raised with every imaginable privilege, and saw only a stranger, a demanding child forever trapped in an adult's body. The familiar ache in her heart was replaced by a profound emptiness, a startling liberation from the burden of expectation, from the relentless pursuit of an affection that would never be given freely. Her expression remained placid, her gaze unwavering as she met their condescending smiles, their smug self-satisfaction. "I see," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, devoid of any trace of hurt or anger, a calm that unnerved them slightly. "Thank you for clarifying." Briar and Sterling, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred within the quiet woman before them, continued to babble about their upcoming adventure, already lost in visions of Mediterranean grandeur and social media perfect sunsets. Elara simply nodded, offering a small, enigmatic smile. That very evening, as the mansion settled into the quiet hush of dusk, and the scent of lilies mingled with the fading light, Elara did not weep. She did not rage. The tears, if they came, would be for the woman she had once been, the woman who had allowed herself to be taken for granted. Instead, with a calm, deliberate hand, she reached for the antique rotary phone on her mahogany desk. Its weight felt substantial, solid, a tool for tangible action. Her first call was to Mr. Davies, her private banker. Her second, to Ms. Anya Sharma, her formidable attorney. The pieces of her life, long scattered by others' demands and desires, were about to be reassembled, piece by methodical piece, by her own hands, into a design of her own choosing. To understand the profound weight of that last straw, one had to understand the decades that preceded it, the slow erosion of a woman's spirit and fortune. Elara's life had been one of quiet luxury, then sudden immense wealth, followed by a long, slow bleed of her fortune into the bottomless pit of her daughter's desires. Her late husband, Edward Thorne, had been more than just a titan of industry, he had been a man of immense integrity and foresight, a quiet visionary who built his empire from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick. His passing 20 years prior had left Elara a vast and unassailable fortune, factories humming with productivity, real estate spanning continents, diversified investments carefully cultivated, and a family trust meticulously designed to provide for generations, ensuring not just comfort but also a legacy of responsibility and dignified living. It was all under Elara's meticulous, if somewhat deferential, control. Edward had envisioned a legacy of responsibility and dignified living, a foundation upon which future generations could build, not merely consume. Elara, however, in her profound grief after his passing, saw it primarily as a means to ensure the happiness of her only child, Briar, and later, her grandchildren. Briar, a vivacious but undeniably self-absorbed girl, had blossomed into a woman who equated love with lavish provision, a constant stream of material gratification. Elara, yearning for the familial closeness she'd always craved after Edward's steady, reassuring presence was gone, had indulged her. And then, she'd indulged her some more, mistaking financial assistance for emotional connection, believing that every gift given would eventually be reciprocated with genuine affection. The financial bleed had begun subtly, almost imperceptibly at first, like a tiny crack in a dam. First, it was the down payment on Briar and Sterling's sprawling mansion in the exclusive hills of Belvedere, a sum that could have purchased several smaller, respectable homes outright. Elara, wanting her daughter to have the very best, to feel secure and celebrated, had covered it without a second thought, seeing it as an investment in Briar's future happiness. Then came the monthly mortgage payments, a staggering amount each month for a property that was technically in Briar and Sterling's names, but whose financial backbone was Elara's account. "It's just until Sterling's next big venture takes off, Mother," Briar would coo, her voice sweet and persuasive, a promise that never materialized, a horizon that perpetually receded. Elara, ever hopeful, had always acquiesced. The luxury vehicles were next, a procession of gleaming metal and status symbols. A new Mercedes S-Class every 3 years for Briar, always the latest model, with every conceivable upgrade. A powerful Range Rover for Sterling, ostensibly for their business meetings, though Elara suspected its primary use was transporting Sterling to various golf courses and exclusive clubs. Elara paid for the leases, the exorbitant insurance, even the bespoke detailing that kept them perpetually pristine. She remembered one Christmas, a few years after Edward's passing, Briar had casually mentioned her desire for a vintage Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, a mere wistful thought spoken during a hurried phone call. By February, a meticulously restored antique had appeared in her driveway, courtesy of Elara's generosity, purchased by her long-suffering financial manager. "Oh, Mother, you're simply the best!" Briar had exclaimed, a quick, almost perfunctory kiss on Elara's cheek, then a week later, a casual request for funds for its exorbitant maintenance and an immediate upgrade to its sound system. The grandchildren, Isabella and Henry, were the apple of Elara's eye, and their education became another substantial drain, one she initially embraced with genuine enthusiasm. Prestigious private schools, the sort with Olympic-sized pools, equestrian facilities, and debate teams that traveled internationally, came with tuition fees that rivaled a small country's GDP. The annual tuition for both children, year after year, along with their extracurricular activities, their elite sports academies, their international school trips to study ancient civilizations or learn new languages, all funneled directly from Elara's accounts. She remembered the fierce pride she felt seeing their names on the honor roll, or hearing of Isabella's artistic achievements, a pride that often eclipsed the sting of the astronomical invoices. Yet, Briar and Sterling rarely acknowledged her contribution, acting as if these were simply the natural entitlements of their children, as if the money magically appeared. "They're such bright children, Mother," Briar would say, "they deserve the best, don't you agree?" A rhetorical question that always ended in a bill. Vacations became a performance art of extravagance, a global tour of the most exclusive resorts. Maldives over New Year's, a month-long ski trip in Aspen every winter, a grand tour of Europe each summer, always first class, always 5-star. Elara covered it all, the private jet charters, the presidential suites, the personal guides, the designer shopping sprees in Paris and Milan. She'd often gently hint, her voice tinged with a faint longing, "Perhaps I could join you for a few days in Rome? I've always wanted to see the Vatican, only to be met with, 'Oh, Mother, you wouldn't enjoy the walking, it's so much easier for us to just zip around. Besides, we're doing a cycling tour that week, far too strenuous for you.'" Their postcards, if they sent any, were brief, impersonal, and usually contained a subtle plea for an early transfer of funds for a new, investment opportunity Sterling had miraculously discovered. Sterling, the perpetually, between ventures, entrepreneur, was a master of leveraging Elara's largesse. His ideas ranged from a luxury dog spa for pampered pedigrees to a high-tech app for forgotten socks. Each venture, invariably, required a significant initial investment, which Elara, swayed by Briar's earnest, and often tearful, appeals, would provide. "He's so close, Mother, just this one last push, it will set us all up for life," Briar would plead. Each venture, invariably, failed, leaving Elara poorer and Sterling with a new, equally absurd, equally expensive idea. He treated her with a condescending politeness, calling her Elara, my dear, or Mother Thorne, while simultaneously envisioning her bank account as his personal venture capital fund, an endless well from which to draw without accountability. Elara's emotional needs, however, remained perpetually unmet. She yearned for genuine affection, for inclusion in their family life beyond the obligatory Sunday brunch that inevitably ended with a financial request for a new foundation for Briar's latest charity, which Briar merely attended, never organized, or seed money for Sterling's next harebrained scheme. Birthdays were often forgotten, or celebrated with hurried, impersonal gifts, usually purchased by Briar's personal assistant on Elara's own credit card. Christmas was a flurry of unwrapped luxury items, rarely a moment of shared warmth or genuine conversation. She was invited to the mansion for family gatherings, but often felt like a carefully placed piece of antique furniture, admired for her value, perhaps, but not truly seen, not truly engaged with. Briar would often wave away her attempts at offering advice or sharing a memory with a dismissive, "Oh Mother, you just don't understand how things work these days. Things are so different now." Elara, with her vast experience, her sharp intellect, her decades of navigating complex business empires, had much to offer, but they saw her only as an outdated relic, a gilded ATM, a quaint but ultimately irrelevant figure. She recalled a particularly painful incident a few years prior, a moment that had solidified her growing sense of isolation. Her beloved Labrador, Winston, a loyal and comforting presence for 15 years, had passed away peacefully in his sleep. Elara, heartbroken and reeling from the silent emptiness he left, had called Briar, hoping for comfort, for a sympathetic ear, for shared grief. Briar, however, had been planning a high-profile charity gala, an event she considered the pinnacle of her social calendar. She had interrupted Elara's tearful confession with, "Mother, darling, I'm so sorry, but I simply cannot talk about this now. I'm in the middle of a crisis, the caterers are late, and the ice sculpture delivery is delayed." The line had gone dead, leaving Elara staring at the phone, a hollow ache in her chest far greater than the grief for Winston. She had learned, slowly and painfully, that her emotional currency was worthless to them, that her vulnerabilities were merely inconveniences. Yet, despite the mounting evidence of their self-absorption and ingratitude, Elara had persisted. She had told herself it was love, that one day they would see her, truly see her, beyond the numbers in her bank account. She had rationalized their behavior as the understandable byproduct of their busy, modern lives, their demanding schedules. Perhaps, she had hoped, they just didn't realize the depth of her contribution, or the quiet desperation of her yearning for connection. This hope, fragile and worn, like a much-mended garment, had been the last thread holding her to the illusion of a loving family, a family that valued her as a person. Until the words, "You just slow us down," and, "You prefer your quiet gardens," echoed in her ears, finally, irrevocably, severing that last, thin thread. The illusion was gone, replaced by a searing clarity. The morning after the yacht revelation dawned crisp and clear, but for Elara, it felt like a new era had begun, marked by the quiet hum of purpose, a serene determination she hadn't felt in decades. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, no internal debate. The profound hurt of decades, the slow accumulation of indignities and rejections, had crystallized into an unshakable resolve, as solid and unyielding as the granite of her estate. She moved with a calm precision, her 78-year-old hands steady as she meticulously organized the documents she would need, the detailed ledgers she had kept for years, a quiet record of every transaction, every indulgence. Her first call was to Mr. Davies, her private banker for over 30 years, a man who had seen the ebb and flow of the Thorne fortune, always with discretion. His voice, usually deferential and slightly verbose, immediately detected a shift in Alara's tone, a new timbre of authority. "Good morning, Mr. Davies," Alara began, her voice clear and firm, leaving no room for argument or equivocation. "I need to make some immediate and comprehensive changes to my financial affairs." Mr. Davies listened, stunned, as Alara systematically dismantled the financial safety net she had woven for Breyer and Sterling, brick by painstaking brick. Firstly, she instructed, her voice unwavering, "I want all direct payments associated with the property at 14, Oakwood Lane, including the mortgage, property taxes, and maintenance fees, to be immediately ceased. Effective today, Mr. Davies. No grace period, no exceptions." Oakwood Lane was Breyer and Sterling's mansion, its very foundation built on Alara's quiet generosity, a generosity that had been taken for granted for far too long. Secondly, Alara continued, her voice gaining strength with each item on her mental list, "All vehicle leases, insurance policies, and maintenance contracts under my name for the benefit of Breyer Thorne and Sterling Vance are to be terminated, or redirected to their direct responsibility. This includes the Mercedes S-Class, the Range Rover, and the vintage Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud." Mr. Davies could almost hear the faint gasp on the other end of the line, a silent acknowledgement of the seismic shift. He knew the value of those vehicles, the annual cost of their upkeep. Thirdly, she said, moving to the core of their daily lavishness, their seemingly endless discretionary spending, "All supplemental credit cards issued under my primary accounts, linked to Breyer Thorne and Sterling Vance, are to be immediately cancelled. Their access to the family trust, which has previously allowed for discretionary withdrawals for their business ventures and children's enrichment, is to be entirely revoked. The trust will be restructured to explicitly exclude them from any future disbursements, save for a small, specified amount for the children, managed independently by an appointed guardian, not by them." She was not abandoning her grandchildren, only ensuring their parents could no longer siphon off their future. Finally, Alara addressed the properties she had quietly acquired over the years, placing them in the names of various shell corporations she controlled, but allowing Breyer and Sterling to live in them rent-free or collect substantial rental income from them. "And lastly, Mr. Davies, I require full access and control reinstated to all properties currently held under the Thorne Vance Residential Holdings LLC. I will be initiating a comprehensive audit of all assets under that umbrella, effective immediately. And please notify the tenants that all future rent payments are to be directed to my accounts." She was reclaiming her own, not just symbolically, but legally and financially. Mr. Davies, a seasoned professional who had witnessed countless family disputes over fortunes, understood the gravity of these instructions. This was not a minor adjustment, it was a financial scorched earth policy, a deliberate severing of all ties. "Understood, Mrs. Thorne," he responded, his voice grave, filled with a newfound respect for her quiet power. "I will action these immediately. You'll receive confirmation emails by midday, and all necessary legal notifications will be dispatched." Her next call was to Ms. Anya Sharma, her formidable attorney. Anya, known for her sharp intellect and even sharper wit, was less surprised. She had often subtly hinted at the overreach of Alara's generosity, the increasingly precarious nature of her arrangements. "Anya, darling," Alara began, a hint of steel in her tone, a dry amusement in her voice, "I need you to revise my will and all associated trusts. My daughter and son-in-law are to be completely disinherited. All previous provisions for their future or their children's education are to be nullified. I will detail the new beneficiaries to you this afternoon, including specific arrangements for Isabella and Henry's genuine welfare, separate from their parents." Anya's response was immediate and resolute, a note of quiet triumph in her voice. "Consider it done, Alara. This is long overdue, and frankly, I applaud your courage." They discussed the legal intricacies, the notifications, the formal processes, and the potential for legal challenges, which Anya dismissed with a confident wave of her hand. Alara felt a profound sense of empowerment with each word, each decision. She was not destroying her family, she realized, she was dismantling a toxic system of dependency and reclaiming her own life, her own agency. The first ripple of panic struck Briar just hours later. She was at the opulent Bloom, her favorite high-end boutique, selecting a new designer gown for an upcoming charity event she was merely attending, not organizing. She handed over her credit card, one of the many Alara had provided, with a flourish, expecting the usual seamless transaction. The sales assistant, usually effusive and deferential, returned with a hesitant expression, her face a mask of polite embarrassment. "Madam, I'm afraid this card has been declined." Briar stared, incredulous, her perfect composure beginning to crack. "Declined? That's impossible. There must be some mistake. Try it again, immediately." The second attempt yielded the same humiliating result. Briar, flustered and scarlet-faced with embarrassment, muttered something about a bank error, snatched the card back, and left the boutique in a huff, abandoning the gown she had coveted. This was a minor annoyance, she thought, something Mother would quickly rectify with a call to the bank. A momentary glitch. Sterling's first sign came later that afternoon. He was attempting to lease a new, even more powerful SUV, a custom-ordered Bentley Bentayga, for his latest, groundbreaking, venture, a high-end concierge service for luxury pet travel. The dealership called him back, their tone apologetic but firm. "Mr. Vance, we're terribly sorry, but the guarantor on your previous leases, Mrs. Thorne, has withdrawn her sponsorship. We can no longer approve your application without a significant down payment and a new guarantor, which our system indicates you do not possess." Sterling dismissed it as a clerical error, perhaps a miscommunication with Alara's bank. He grumbled to himself, Mother's getting forgetful in her old age, probably clicked the wrong button. The following morning, the reality began to bite harder, sinking its teeth in with chilling precision. Briar received an automated email from their mortgage lender, "Urgent notice, your recent payment was declined. Immediate action required to prevent foreclosure proceedings." Her blood ran cold. She stared at the screen, her perfectly manicured hands trembling, the sleek glass of her tablet reflecting her pale, panicked face. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. A deliberate, calculated strike. Simultaneously, Sterling received a call from the Rolls-Royce dealership, inquiring about overdue lease payments on the vintage Silver Cloud. "Mr. Vance, we regret to inform you that if the payment is not received within 24 hours, we will have no choice but to repossess the vehicle. We've been attempting to reach Mrs. Thorne, but her office informs us she's no longer handling your accounts." Briar, her face pale, her composure completely shattered, rushed to Sterling, who was equally frantic, clutching his phone. "What is going on, Sterling?" "My credit card, the mortgage, your car. It's all Mother, isn't it? She's gone mad. She's finally lost it. This is outrageous." The initial annoyance had morphed into a chilling dread, a dawning horror that froze them both. Their luxurious world, built on a foundation of Alara's silently flowing wealth, was not merely cracking, it was beginning to crumble, brick by painful brick. They tried calling Alara, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Then her private line. Then her assistant's number. All dead ends. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening, more terrifying than any angry word or shouted accusation. They knew, with a certainty that made their stomachs churn, that their carefully constructed facade of opulence was collapsing, brick by painful brick. The only path, they concluded, the only hope of salvaging their crumbling empire, was to confront the source of their sudden destitution. The heavy oak doors of Alara's mansion burst open, shattering the morning's tranquility like a gunshot. Briar and Sterling stormed in, their usual polished facades replaced by raw panic and barely contained rage. Briar's expensive cashmere sweater was rumpled, her hair disheveled, strands escaping her once perfect chignon. Her eyes, usually sparkling with self-satisfaction, were wide with a desperate fear she rarely allowed to surface. Sterling, typically so composed and fastidiously dressed, had a vein throbbing visibly in his temple, his tailored suit jacket askew, his tie loosened, a testament to his agitation. They looked like refugees from their own privileged lives, their entitlements stripped bare. Elara sat in her favorite armchair in the drawing room, bathed in the soft morning light filtering through the stained glass window. She was dressed in a simple, elegant navy suit, its lines clean and sharp, her posture impeccable, radiating an unshakable inner strength. A half-finished crossword puzzle lay on the small table beside her, her pen resting neatly beside it, as if she had just paused for a thoughtful moment. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips, a smile of quiet satisfaction, utterly unperturbed by the storm that had just entered her home. "Mother! What have you done?" Briar shrieked, her voice cracking with indignation, a raw, animal sound Elara had rarely heard from her. "Are you out of your mind? My card was declined. The bank sent a foreclosure notice for the house. Sterling's car is about to be repossessed. What is the meaning of this madness? Do you realize what you're doing to us?" Sterling, attempting to regain some semblance of control, stepped forward, his voice a strained attempt at reason, laced with its usual condescension. "Elara, my dear, this is simply preposterous. There must be some grave misunderstanding. Perhaps you're confused about your accounts. You know, at your age, things can get a bit complicated. We're simply trying to understand. This isn't like you." His patronizing tone, a familiar irritant for decades, now grated on Elara's ears like fingernails on a chalkboard, amplified by the sheer audacity of his insinuation. Elara slowly set down her pen, her movements deliberate, unhurried, emphasizing her control. Her gaze, unwavering, looked first at Briar, then at Sterling. Her eyes, usually soft and forgiving, now seemed like chips of ice, reflecting back their own fear and avarice, utterly devoid of the warmth they had once sought to exploit. "There is no misunderstanding, Briar," she stated, her voice calm, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion, a chillingly steady tone. "And I assure you, Sterling, my mind is as sharp as it has ever been. Sharper, perhaps, now that it is unburdened by illusions, by the foolish hope that you might one day value me for anything other than my fortune." Briar gasped, tears suddenly welling in her eyes, a practiced maneuver Elara had seen countless times, a performance designed to tug at her heartstrings, to elicit sympathy and compliance. "How can you say that, Mother? We're your family. Your only family. Do you want us to be homeless? Do you want your grandchildren to be cast out into the streets, without an education, without a roof over their heads? How could you be so cruel? After all we've done for you, all the times we invited you here for Sunday brunch." Her voice rose to a dramatic wail, a crescendo of manufactured distress. Elara remained unmoved, her expression unchanging. The tears held no power over her now. "Cruel, Briar? Is it cruel to finally cease enabling a parasitic existence? For decades, I have poured my fortune, my very lifeblood, Edward's hard-earned legacy, into your comfort, your endless desires, your insatiable greed. Every extravagant whim, every luxury vehicle, every lavish vacation to the Maldives or Aspen, every dollar for your oversized mansion and your children's elite education, it all came from me. From Edward's hard-earned legacy, a legacy I was entrusted to manage, not squander on your frivolous consumption." Sterling interjected, attempting a more manipulative approach, trying to shift the emotional landscape. "Now, Elara, let's be rational. We are a family. And families help each other. We've always been there for you, haven't we? All those delightful visits, all the calls, inviting you to our Christmas gatherings, we love you, Elara. We always have. You're our mother." His voice dripped with false sincerity, a nauseatingly sweet coating over his true intentions. Elara's gaze sharpened, piercing through his flimsy facade, exposing the rot beneath. "Love, Sterling? Is that what you call it? Is it love when you dismiss my every opinion, when you treat me as an inconvenient relic, an outdated ornament in your perfect world? Is it love when my daughter calls me only to ask for money, or to inform me of another grand vacation, fully funded by me, from which I am explicitly excluded? Is it love when you allowed my beloved Winston to die alone while Briar concerned herself with caterers? You wanted me gone from your lives, didn't you? You made that abundantly clear yesterday, didn't you, Briar, when you so casually told me I'd slow you down on my Mediterranean cruise? You treated me as an ATM, a silent, endless dispenser of funds, a convenient resource to be exploited at will. Well, the ATM is now out of cash for you. Briar stared, her mouth agape, her performance forgotten, her tears dried on her cheeks. But that was just a joke, Mother. You know how I am. It was just a silly comment. You're overreacting. A silly comment, Elara repeated, the words laced with a quiet scorn that chilled them to the bone, that reflected years of casual contempt. Years of forgotten birthdays, of promises of visits unfulfilled, of my yearning for genuine connection being met with thinly veiled requests for more money, more things, never a moment of true reciprocal affection. You didn't want me, Briar. You wanted what I possessed. You wanted my money, and you wanted me out of the way, a quiet, compliant source of funds who never asked for anything in return. Sterling, now desperate, tried a different tack, appealing to their vanity. This is insane, Elara. Think of the optics. What will our friends say? What about the children? Isabella and Henry will be devastated, their lives ruined. The children, Elara said, a flicker of genuine sadness in her eyes, a fleeting regret for the path their parents had chosen for them, will learn the value of hard work, something you have consistently shielded them from, despite my warnings. As for your friends, Sterling, perhaps they will learn that true wealth is not measured by the size of one's yacht or the brand of one's car, but by the integrity of one's character. And frankly, your social standing is no longer my concern, nor has it ever truly been. Elara stood then, slowly, deliberately, her 78 years seeming to melt away, replaced by an imposing aura of authority, a quiet power that filled the room. This isn't a negotiation, Briar. This is a declaration. The financial tap is irrevocably closed. All payments have been stopped. All access revoked. The properties are being reclaimed. You are on your own. You wanted independence from my interference, and now you have it. You will learn, as I have, that self-reliance is a powerful, if sometimes painful, teacher. Briar's face contorted in a mixture of disbelief, rage, and dawning horror. You can't do this. We'll fight you. We'll sue you. You're old, you're confused, you're senile. We'll have you declared incompetent. Her voice was shrill, desperate, clinging to any last straw. Elara merely smiled, a slow, chilling smile that didn't reach her eyes, a smile that promised retribution. My attorney, Ms. Anya Sharma, is already fully aware of my mental acuity, which she assures me is sharper than ever. And I believe you'll find that any legal challenge will be met with a comprehensive accounting of every cent I have spent on you, and every communication, every financial request, which will only serve to expose your avarice to the world. Do you truly wish to gamble your last shreds of reputation on that? Do you truly wish for society to know the full extent of your exploitation? Briar and Sterling stood frozen, their threats turning to dust in their mouths. The reality of Elara's unshakable resolve, backed by her immense power and formidable legal team, finally dawned on them. They were outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and utterly defeated. The grand plans, the social events, the designer clothes, all seemed to vanish, replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of their precarious future. Now, Elara said, her voice dropping, a final, definitive command, leave. And do not return until you understand what true independence means. When you genuinely seek a relationship with me, not my fortune, perhaps then we can speak. But I warn you, that day may never come. She gestured towards the door, a silent, absolute dismissal. Briar and Sterling, their faces ashen, their pride shattered, stumbled backward, their once imposing presence reduced to pathetic figures scrambling for the exit. The heavy oak doors closed behind them with a resounding thud, sealing the end of an era. Elara, finally alone, felt a profound, exhilarating sense of freedom, a lightness in her spirit she hadn't known in decades. The drive home for Briar and Sterling was silent, heavy with the weight of their shattered world. The Range Rover, still technically theirs for a few more days before its inevitable repossession, felt like a sarcophagus of their once luxurious existence. Briar stared out the window, her mind racing through the endless expenditures, the carefree spending, the casual dismissals of every bill as mother's problem. She saw the designer handbags, the expensive jewelry, the grand vacations, not as cherished memories, but as fleeting indulgences, gone forever. Sterling gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, the phantom touch of Elara's icy dismissal still stinging his ears, her calm words echoing his own shame. The dream had ended, and the nightmare was just beginning. The first week was a whirlwind of escalating panic, a dizzying descent into a reality they had never conceived. The foreclosure notice for the mansion became a formal eviction notice, swift and brutal. The bank, no longer receiving payments, was merciless in its efficiency. Then came the calls from their luxury car dealerships, increasingly aggressive, culminating in the ignominious sight of a tow truck outside their palatial driveway, its mechanical arm reaching for the sleek Mercedes S-Class, then the powerful Range Rover. The vintage Rolls-Royce, Sterling's proudest, and most expensive, possession, his symbol of arriving, was towed away with the others, a visible, public symbol of their crumbling status. Briar burst into frantic tears as she watched it go, not for any sentimental value, but for the sheer humiliation, the public exposure of their fall. "Everyone will see," she wailed, collapsing into Sterling's arms. Their credit cards, once limitless founts of purchasing power, were now worthless plastic, repeatedly declined. Attempts to buy groceries, fill up gas for Sterling's old sedan, their only remaining vehicle, owned outright by him from a time before Elara's endless generosity, or even order takeout were met with polite but firm rejections. Briar, who had never known a budget, who had never glanced at a price tag, stared at a supermarket receipt as if it were written in an alien language, realizing the astronomical cost of the simplest necessities, bread, milk, eggs. She tried to use her personal savings, a small sum amassed from small gifts from Elara, but years of frivolous spending had left them almost non-existent. The shock was visceral. The social fallout was equally brutal, perhaps even more so for Briar. Their invitations to exclusive parties dried up as quickly as their funds. Friends who had eagerly accepted their hospitality, admired their opulent lifestyle, and sought their company now suddenly became busy or simply stopped returning calls. Whispers followed Briar at her usual haunts, the country club, the elite charity luncheons she frequented. People who once fawned over her now offered pitying glances or outright avoided eye contact, as if their financial misfortune were contagious. Their social currency, tied entirely to their financial one, had depreciated to zero. Briar, a socialite to her core, felt the sting of this loss more acutely than the loss of her physical possessions. Her identity had been stripped away. Their marriage, always a transactional alliance built on shared ambition and convenience, began to fray under the relentless pressure. Briar blamed Sterling for his failed ventures, for his inability to provide for them, for his empty promises of endless wealth. "You were supposed to be the provider, Sterling. You said your next deal would make us rich. Look at us now," she screamed one evening, throwing a designer cushion across the now sparsely decorated living room, its emptiness amplifying her fury. Sterling, in turn, blamed Briar for her extravagant spending, for her endless demands, for her inability to curb her desires. "You're the one who emptied Elara's accounts, Briar. You're the one who kept pushing her for more and more, even when I warned you." Their arguments echoed through the empty mansion, bitter and futile, yet they were bound by their shared predicament, their mutual resentment the only thing holding them together. The children, Isabella and Henry, were caught in the crossfire, their lives upended. They had been accustomed to a life of boundless privilege, private jets to ski resorts, boarding school with every amenity, designer clothes, and unlimited pocket money. Suddenly, they were told they could no longer attend their prestigious private school. A public school awaited them, a concept so foreign it might as well have been another planet. Their nannies and tutors were let go. Their allowances were cut off. Isabella, a spoilt teenager, wailed about her impending social ruin, the indignity of riding a bus. Henry, younger and perhaps more adaptable, seemed merely confused but also somewhat intrigued by the novelty of riding a public bus, a new adventure. Meanwhile, within her own walls, Elara began to breathe. The oppressive weight of decades of resentment and unfulfilled yearning had lifted, replaced by a profound lightness of spirit. The silence in her mansion, once a lonely echo of her solitude, was now a comforting sanctuary, a space for quiet reflection and personal rediscovery. She spent an entire afternoon in her garden, pruning her roses with meticulous care, something she hadn't truly enjoyed in years, too burdened by the thought of Briar's latest financial request, too distracted by the constant hum of her daughter's demands. She felt the sun on her skin, the earth beneath her fingers, a connection to something real and tangible. That evening, she called Penelope, an old university friend she hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Their friendship had drifted apart after Edward's death, Elara becoming consumed by Briar's needs, Penelope by her own demanding career. Their conversation flowed easily, as if no time had passed, reminiscing about shared adventures, quiet coffees in sunlit libraries, and laughter over silly college antics. Elara found herself genuinely smiling, a smile that reached her eyes, a smile that was not forced or tinged with underlying sorrow, but purely joyous. Penelope invited her to join a local book club that met weekly at the community library, and Elara, to her own surprise, readily accepted, eager for intellectual stimulation and genuine companionship. She started small, building her new life piece by piece. She reacquainted herself with her vast library, diving into classic novels she had always meant to read, losing herself in worlds far removed from her past anxieties. She took long, leisurely walks in her sprawling gardens, noticing the delicate patterns of light and shadow, the intricate dance of nature she had been too distracted to appreciate before. She contacted a local historical society, offering her time and considerable organizational skills, finding a deep satisfaction in contributing to something meaningful, something that transcended the superficial. For the first time in memory, Elara was doing things not out of obligation, not to please others, but out of genuine interest and joy. She felt a lightness, a profound sense of peace. The storm outside her walls raged on for her estranged family, but within, Elara had found her calm, her clarity, and her nascent freedom. Months turned into a year, then 2, then 3. The seasons cycled through Elara's perfectly manicured gardens, each bloom a testament to growth and renewal, mirroring the transformation within her. Elara Thorne, now 80, had shed the last vestiges of the long-suffering matriarch, blossoming into a woman of vibrant independence and quiet joy. Her days were filled with purpose and genuine connection. She became an active and cherished member of her book club, engaging in lively debates that stimulated her formidable intellect, her sharp mind surprising even herself. She volunteered extensively at the local historical society, quickly becoming indispensable, using her keen organizational skills to catalog centuries-old archives and plan wildly successful fundraising events that brought her quiet satisfaction. Her social circle was no longer limited to transactional visits from her daughter. She cultivated genuine friendships with people who valued her for her wit, her wisdom, and her genuine kindness, not her immense fortune. She finally took that Mediterranean cruise, not alone, but with Penelope and another close friend from the Historical Society, a woman who shared her love for art and ancient history. They explored the ancient ruins of Greece at their own leisurely pace, savored fresh seafood on the Amalfi coast, and watched breathtaking sunsets over Santorini, just as Elara had always dreamed. There was no rush, no pressure, no one to slow down. She lingered over local art, indulged in leisurely meals, and found a profound satisfaction in spending her own money, earned through decades of wise stewardship, entirely on her own terms, fulfilling her own dreams. A subtle postcard, depicting a vibrant scene of a sun-drenched Greek island, its message brief and impersonal, was sent to Breyer's old address, perhaps as a silent message of closure, perhaps merely a symbolic act of moving on. Breyer and Sterling's opulent world, meanwhile, had been irrevocably dismantled. The mansion was foreclosed upon and sold, its grand rooms emptied of the frivolous luxuries that had defined their existence. They had been forced to downsize drastically, moving into a modest three-bedroom apartment in a less fashionable part of town, the very idea of which would have once sent shivers down Breyer's spine. The shock of having to live on a budget, to manage their own bills, to even cook their own meals, had been profound, a daily struggle against a reality they refused to fully accept. Breyer, who had never worked a day in her life, who had only ever managed social calendars and charity committees, found herself taking a job as a sales associate in a mid-range department store. The endless hours on her feet, the demanding customers, the meager paycheck, it was a brutal awakening to a world she had scorned. She complained constantly, her voice still laced with a bitter sense of injustice, but the threat of absolute destitution kept her going, fueled by a desperation she never knew she possessed. Sterling, after several more failed, self-funded ventures that only dug them deeper into debt, finally swallowed his pride and took a respectable but unremarkable job in corporate sales, a far cry from his grand, entrepreneurial, dreams and the image of a titan he had once projected. Their relationship, though strained and often punctuated by bitter arguments, had surprisingly endured, forged in the crucible of shared adversity. Stripped of the crutch of Alara's wealth, they were forced to confront their own limitations and, begrudgingly, began to build a life based on their own efforts, however humble. It was not a happy life in the way they had once known, but it was, finally, a self-sufficient one. Isabella and Henry had adjusted with varying degrees of difficulty. Isabella, initially devastated by the move to public school and the loss of her social standing, slowly began to find her footing in a new environment, away from the sheltered privilege she had known. She discovered a talent for debate and, without the constant flow of easy money and the distractions of luxury, developed a nascent appreciation for hard work and genuine achievement. Henry, always more pragmatic and less concerned with appearances, thrived in the less sheltered environment of public school, making genuine friends and excelling in sports, finding a freedom his old life hadn't offered. They visited Alara occasionally, often unannounced, sometimes just for a quiet chat, without any requests for money or veiled demands. These visits were still somewhat awkward, tinged with the unspoken past, but Alara noticed a subtle shift in their demeanor, a quiet humility and a genuine curiosity that had been absent before. She offered them advice, shared stories from her own remarkable life, and for the first time, felt a glimmer of genuine familial warmth, untainted by expectation or transaction. Alara's decision, once perceived as an act of cold retribution, had in fact been an act of profound self-preservation, and perhaps, a harsh but necessary lesson for her family. She had bought her freedom, not with money, but by reclaiming her self-worth, her dignity, and her right to live her life on her own terms. She had learned that love and respect could not be bought, only earned. True wealth, she realized, was not measured in possessions or inherited fortunes, but in autonomy, in genuine connections, and in the profound peace that comes from living a life aligned with one's own values and purposes. The greatest act of loyalty, she realized, was ultimately owed to oneself, to the quiet, dignified woman who had finally chosen herself. If Alara's journey from quiet despair to profound liberation resonated with you, and if you find yourself cheering for those who reclaim their power and rewrite their own narratives, then you found the right place. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you more compelling true stories of justice, resilience, and life lessons learned the hard way. Don't miss out on future stories that will inspire and provoke thought. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new video drops. And now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever faced such blatant ingratitude from someone you've helped? What would you have done if you were in Alara's shoes? Share your thoughts, your experiences, and your wisdom in the comments below. We read every single one, and your insights truly enrich our community.